A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. We're going to be chatting with him about what we're all seeing right now in college basketball, how you take a look at a game like Kansas State versus Baylor, where Baylor's not been great all season long, and Kansas State, well, as we know, they let go of Coach Jerome Tang over the weekend as well, and we're also going to be talking about some of these teams that maybe have had lesser starts of the season that are still showing fight, and teams that are not showing fight as well. We're going to dive all into the Tuesday card with him as well. In the final segment, gonna get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Had a great day of college basketball on Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
We'll get you Iowa State versus Houston on the back half of things, but the first-ranked team in action was Duke, and they absolutely lambasted Syracuse, 101-64 the final is. For Duke, they've been one of your top 100 teams in all of college basketball. 8 overs, 18 unders. This was one of the overs because they just lambasted Syracuse. 12 of 20 from three-point range. Cam Boozer, 22 points, 12 rebounds. Got some help from his friends with Isaiah Evans being able to give you 21 points. You had Nicolas Kamina off the bench being able to give you 14 points for Duke. They win the turnover battle 11-4. They win the rebound battle 39-29, and just not a great effort here from Syracuse to say the least. And we had a lot of good under teams that were in action on Monday as Delaware State 5 overs of 15 unders thus far this season, but you did see one of the overs happen on Monday as they got lambasted by Howard 91-59 the final. And Howard, they themselves have been a good under team with 14 unders to 9 overs thus far this season, but Delaware State, they just had nothing going in this game for Delaware State. They lost the turnover battle by a count of 16-14. They lose the rebound battle 38-21. Howard 24 of 30 at the free throw line, and it's not even like they had a massive game out of Bryce Harris. He went 17 points, just 4 or 5 from the floor because he had 9 free throws in this game. But Howard, a nice, very convincing win there. So that was a lot of fun. Another really good under team. How about Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin? And they're your best cover team in the country as well. 15 unders to 9 overs, and one of those overs did happen on Monday, but they are now 19-5 against the spread. Crack another one open for Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. They gave up a little bit more in the second half, but they held Texas A&M Corpus Christi to 7 points in the first 14:40 of this game, 78-68. Another win and cover for them. For Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, Lateef Patrick was your main man in this game with 21 points. For Stephen F. Austin, they actually lose the rebound battle 38-36, but they win the turnover battle 11-6. For Corpus Christi, they go 9-25 from 3, 8 of 19 for our good friend Stone Cold Steve F. Austin. So they do find a way to just keep it going, and they get the job done once again. Howard, by the way, 15-7-1 against the spread. They were another one of your top against the spread teams that were in action on Monday. Another team has been able to make you a little bit of money thus far this season. It's been a little bit of an up and down ride for them, but Elkhorn State has been an interesting team. 14-9-1 against the spread for them thus far this season. Now, it was Florida A&M who was able to get them on the save. For Florida A&M, a big second half out of them, 86-78 final in this one in a relative pick'em game. And for Florida A&M, 9-21 from 3, and they've had a little bit of a come up here under Coach Charlie Ward. Yes, that Charlie Ward, as Anquan Bolden Jr. We want to go with some football references, as Charlie Ward won the Heisman back in the day. He had 9 points off the bench, and for Elkhorn State, they've been a solid 3-point shooting team, just 4 of 13 on this day. But for Elkhorn State, they were able to go 20 out of 23 at the free throw line to be able to help you out with regards to that over, but no cover out of them. You also had some lesser teams against the spread in all of college basketball take the floor, and Coppin State has been a relatively rough team all season long, and Coppin State has actually been one of your better over teams as well. Coppin State, though, now 11-15 against the spread, and Coppin State 16 overs to 10 unders, as the day started out with them in the MEAC being able to get the job done against South Carolina State, 59-57 the final. And for Coppin State, they outscored South Carolina in the second half, 37-29, and for Coppin State, they actually lose the turnover battle 19-11. They go 22 of 43 from the floor, and for South Carolina State, just 22 out of 58 from the field. So a little bit of an interesting disparity out there. Another good over team that was in action on Monday, Boston U, 16 overs to 10 unders in your lone Patriot League game of the day. They just absolutely land-based Colgate, 85 to 58 the final. As for Boston U, they go 18 out of 30 from three-point range, and they went, I'm not even kidding here, 13 out of 28 on their two-point shots. Both teams shot better from three than they did from two-point range, and as a matter of fact, Boston U had pretty much the same free throw shooting percentage as they did three-point shooting percentage. They went 5 of 8 at the free throw line, and for Colgate, they go 9 of 21 from three-point range. They go 11 out of 37 on their two-point shots. Colgate, they actually win the turnover battle 7 to 6, but they lose the rebound battle 38 to 29, and for Boston U, you had Azmar Abdullah go 8 of 8 from the floor, 8 of 8 from three, and Sam Hughes 5 of 7 from three-point range. So that was quite the expose out there. If you're looking at some of the other good cover teams that were in action on Monday as well, we've had some interesting teams out there in the MEAC in terms of being able to make you some money thus far this season, as Howard has been that top team at 15-7-1 against the spread, but Maryland Eastern Shore, they silently have went 14-11-1 against the spread for the Shore. They hold in there against Norfolk State, 70 to 66 the final. Now, if you take a look at the closing numbers in this game, Norfolk State in a lot of spots was about a 2.5 point favorite, so they were able to get the cover. Norfolk State was, and for Delaware State, by the way, getting back to them now, 7-13 against the spread, but it was in a lot of cases on the overnight numbers and under for you in this Maryland Eastern Shore game, as they've played darn near 60+% of their games to the under, as well as Norfolk State goes 9 of 18 from three-point range, and Maryland Eastern Shore 7-13 at the free throw line. When you lose by 4 points, that turns out to be very, very costly, but still, that was a relatively fun one. Out there in the SWAC, we have seen a rise from Bethune-Cookman here in conference play, but they suffer a loss at Jackson State, 91 to 86 the final, and it's been really interesting to look at Jackson State because they just got absolutely lambasted in non-conference play. But if you look at what they've been able to do in conference play and conference play only, they've went 8-5 against the spread. Only Elkhorn State has been better against the spread within the conference, and for Jackson State, they were able to get a nice quite a bit of something going from three-point range. 10 of 20 from three-point range with Dorian McMillan going 6 of 7 from 3. 20 points to Sean Ruffin, the former Ole Miss, shall we say, standout. 28 points, goes 15 of 16 at the free throw line. And for Bethune-Cookman, you had in this game Ontario Morris come off the bench for just 13 points, but Jacoby Heady, 25 points. We're still missing the doctor, by the way, Dr. Bradley. So we need to see when he is going to be coming back. Grambling has been one of your more interesting teams in terms of a total perspective, as they've been very, very good to the under. 7 overs to 16 unders thus far this season. They play another under as Prairie View gets the job done outright on the money line as a slight underdog, 68 to 63 the final. Despite Prairie View going just 1 of 11 from three-point range, they got it done at the free throw line though, 23 out of 29 at the charity stripe. For Prairie View, they win the turnover battle 17 to 10, and you had Jamal Mutleap for Grambling go for 25 points, but the turnovers turned out to be just a little bit too much in this one. So Prairie View, they do find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done in that one. Already mentioned the fact that out there in the Southland, you've got one very demonstrative cover team in Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, who was able to get the job done on Monday. But that said, you've been able to have Northwestern State now go 14-10-1 against the spread this season. And for Northwestern State, they were able to do a nice job if you had the team total under of McNeese to hold them to 2 points in the final, I believe it was 8+ minutes. And Northwestern State is a double-figure underdog. They do find a way to cover 75 to 64 the final. A crash landing with regards to the total, as well as a lot of places close this more in that neighborhood about a 138.5, 139, it depended upon your number if you got over or not, because for McNeese, they just had no scoring in this game. This was a game that was 72 to 51 with about 8 minutes remaining, and from there, McNeese scored 3 points. So if you had the over in this game, he didn't quite get there. That's a big reason why, but that was interesting, as McNeese has been very good in terms of generating turnovers this year, and they once again won the turnover battle 13-5, but for Northwestern State, just 2 of 14 from three-point, but 22 out of 27 at the free throw line to be able to get you that cover. And Incarnate Word, well, the word is that they are not good at being able to cover numbers. 8-16 against the spread. They get absolutely pounded on Monday, 78 to 64 against New Orleans, so another non-cover as New Orleans. They had in this game 18 points out of Colton Benson, one of the better mid-major sharpshooters that you're going to find. And for Incarnate Word, they lose the turnover battle by a count of 11-7. They play even up with regards to rebounds, 38 to 38, but they shoot just 36% from the floor, so another relatively brutal one for them. And in the Southland, we've been been seeing a very interesting trend of unders with regards to a lot of these teams as well. I mentioned Stone Cold Steve F. Austin, way that they've been able to play unders. You've got Southeast Louisiana up to 10 overs to 16 unders, as in an early game you had East Texas A&M take it to them 70-53. The final is East Texas A&M goes 6 of 20 from 3 and 12 out of 23 at the free throw line, but won that rebound battle 41-34, and this game was just all sorts of sloppy with Southeast Louisiana shooting 29% from the floor, so not great. Getting back to New Orleans, by the way, even with the under on Monday, they're now 17 overs to 10 unders, so they've been able to cash you quite a few of those as well. Then the night wraps up with quite a game out there in Iowa as Iowa State, they find a way to persevere, get the job done by a count of 70-67 against Houston. If you like me at 2.5 with Houston, this was all sorts of rough, but for Iowa State, they find a way to overcome being down double figures in the second half, thanks to getting a very nice performance off the bench from Nate Heisey, who was able to supply 11.6 rebounds. Houston does win the rebound battle 35-31, and for Iowa State, they nearly blew this game at the free throw line, 11 of 22 at the free throw line, but when they missed a free throw with 4 seconds remaining, he had a big rebound from Tamon Lipsby. He only had 9 points in this game, but 8 rebounds, 4 assists of his own, and here's how Iowa State won the game. The turnover battle. They won that 7-3 for Houston. You'd have Kingston Fleming score off for 22 points, and team went 12 of 34 from 3-point range, but Iowa State, they find a way to persevere. They get the job done in this one for a cover, and that was one that went over the total. And if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, over the last 7 days, we've been seeing a lot of overs. 176 overs, so 155 unders, so that's a little bit over 53% to the over, and the underdog's still doing rock solid. 170 and 161 against the spread over the last 7 days, just a hair below 51% against the spread. Season to date, the underdogs, they're hitting at about 51.3%, 2,296 and 2,182 against the spread. Meanwhile, the over rate right around about 49.3%, 2,209 overs, 2,270 unders. That's where we're seeing college basketball right now. That's what we're getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Rob Donaldson right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family and Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such a great job over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Does a great job over at Underdog Fantasy as well, as he's dialed in to a little bit of everything there. Also does a great job on the football and baseball side of things as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And certainly this is our time of year where, every single conference, whether you like high major ball, mid major ball, low major ball, it's just competitive basketball across the board. And we're already starting to see, the organizational shakeups, if you will, with a team like a Kansas State. And that's just kind of leading to the drama of the season, as even like these TROs are getting removed from certain players across the board as well. So yeah, this is a very exciting time, and it's really coming down to the wire in college basketball.
And I know you talked about this a little bit the last time you joined me on some of these teams that may or may not have quit. And boy, am I glad to have you aboard, because now we've got the first game for Kansas State without Jerome Tang aboard on Tuesday. They're right now about 4.5-point underdogs against Baylor, and that total's right around about 161.5. What do you make out of this game? Because I feel like there's a lot of ways to be able to attack it. There's a lot of people that might think that, hey, they have the interim coaching regime, they're going to fight for them. them. They might lay down. How do you look at a game like this, especially with the Baylor team that they themselves have not been great this far this season, and it feels like they might be giving up on the season a little bit too.
I think bingo. I think you nailed it in terms of Baylor has kind of laid down late in these games when it starts to get a little bit out of hand. Kansas State, we've been seeing it from them all the way back to, I think, the Bowling Green game is kind of what really put an emphasis on, wow, the money doesn't just make a roster. You got to actually show up and play. I think to the point of Kansas State already making the move with Jerome Tang and the way that they framed it as if Jerome Tang was embarrassing the players, doing damage to the program and the brand, all this, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a load of garbage, in my opinion. But I think from that standpoint, when you remove that type of guy and the players maybe feel like, hey, let's go show that it was that guy's fault that was kind of holding us back. I do tend to think that a talented roster can show up in that type of spot when they are that kind of almost self-absorbed to an extent. So if you want to take a shot on even like a Kansas State outright winner there, I don't mind that play. I might even be backing it with the points. And that's how I analyze that situation, especially with Baylor on the other side being just a big brand that's kind of falling flat in its face right now.
Yeah, both of these teams have had a really, really rough season, to say the least, and I don't know if I want the money line here with Kansas State because it has been less than savory, to say the least, but I'm not feeling good about laying points with Baylor in just about any situation either, so that's going to be a fun one. And how do you take a look at these sorts of situations this time of year? Because we are probably going to see a few other coaches getting canned / coaches on the precipice of getting canned. I'm looking at you, Wes Miller. There might be a few vacancies out there in the Big 12 because I think that's just such an interesting spot with these teams that have had, shall we say, some underachievement this year.
Yeah, and I think honestly, Greg, if you look across the board, obviously the high major coaching potential openings are the ones that always grab people's attention, right? I mean, you think of a team like a South Carolina that's playing tomorrow, potentially like a Boston College, for example. Do they rally around their new head coach? But there's also the element of like some of these MAC teams. Like I think of, a Dwayne Stevens at Western Michigan taking on the cream of the crop and the MAC or one of the top teams in Akron. Do they finally show up for Dwayne Stevens, which it almost kind of feels like is undoubtedly his last year? I think there's a lot of questions. Ohio State is in that very similar boat. This is what happens when you get down to crunch time this given year. And heck, not only do we have the coaches on the hot seat drama building up this college basketball slate here on Tuesday, we also just have the bubble talk with a game like a Virginia Tech versus a Miami. So I think across the board, you can find those quote unquote motivational angles and you can really pick and choose which ones you gravitate towards the most. And surely that's what it kind of comes down to when you're handicapping a large slate like this.
No question about it. As we do have Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show / podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And man, do we have some big games that are going to be going down on Tuesday, including one out there in the Big Ten between Michigan and Purdue. Right now, Michigan about a 1.5, 2-point favorite. That totals 156.5. How do you take a look at a spot like this where Michigan, they have been so dominant down low, but Purdue, they've got those veteran guys out there in the backcourt, and you've got a Michigan team that's looking to play very up-tempo. Purdue, while they're very efficient on offense, they're not very fast as well. It feels like this is everything that you could want at a college basketball game in terms of compare and contrast.
And honestly, this is my favorite game of the entire season so far. Not only just given the fact that it's Purdue versus Michigan, but also the venue of the event. It's Mackey. It's this historic site. Purdue's playing their best basketball of the season coming into this game. When you look at Michigan so far, obviously, you can't just watch this team and not be impressed throughout the entire year. They have played Nebraska and beat them down to the wire after having to come back in that game. They went into the Breslin Center, beat Michigan State. They had those beatdowns early on in the season, but you know what we really haven't seen Michigan go up against that I'm so intrigued by? Just size, in terms of the big men size, but also the physical perimeter defense that Purdue is going to hit Michigan with in this ball game. Michigan has almost been like a bully with a Daymara, Yenza, Lendebor, and all these great, really great athletes at every single position that had the physicality just bully the guy across from them. That's not going to happen in Mackey against Matt Painter, against this team. And for that reason, I am going to take my shot here with Purdue. I think ultimately it's going to be just a great game in general, but I think this is the first time that we can actually sell confidently on a red-hot Michigan team just because it's a different style that they haven't seen before, and the variance because of that really leads to a lot of outcomes that favor a Purdue win here.
Yep, and with this Purdue team, I'm a little bit more of a believer in that great backcourt play rather than frontcourt play, but that does lead to a little bit of a bigger question as well, because right now in college basketball, if you look at most of the top teams in college basketball, sure, you've got some solid guard play, but it feels like it's teams based a little bit more around bigs. Like Arizona is a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. Duke has been a much better team on the inside rather than the outside. You're able to go down the list of all these teams. Houston, I would say, has a very good guard play, but they're even a team that does a really good job taking care of the ball. They're rock solid down low. How do you take a look at this season in college basketball where it feels like a lot of the top teams in the sport are not taking a lot of threes and they're instead looking to pile drive the ball down low and win from within?
Yeah, and honestly, I think physicality is the name of the game this season, because if you look at just the top 5 teams based on, where they're getting slated, whether it's KenPom, Net, Bart Torvik, and you're looking notably at just that adjust defensive end of the court, 4 of the top 5 teams are 4 of the top 5 teams in that specific category. And then you have, say, an Illinois, you have Purdue in the mix, which falls a little bit outside of that specific category. And I love that. I love that there's some identity to college hoops, which isn't just like the AAU uncaged offense. I'm going to shoot a lot of jump shots in transition early in the shot clock. There's some methodicalness that's going on in the sport this year. And I think notably it's because a lot of teams looked at how they performed against the best of the best last year. And we saw what ultimately happened. A lot of top end seeds in the NCAA tournament and through those conference tournaments won their conference tournaments and advanced to the Elite Eight, Final Four, championship game. It was a very chalk-esque tournament. And so how do those teams that are maybe on the 3, 4, 5 end seed line end up stacking up against those top end teams that are paying a lot for their really talented rosters? You change up the way you're styling and you're battling these teams. And that's what I think we're seeing this year. That's why I think the floor in terms of the openness of this sport is this year is really kind of hemorrhaging on that. And because of that, I think we're getting a lot of really great games and a lot of really great games to come down the stretch here.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I think that this is going to be an incredible season in college basketball. And how much you just take a look at the overall depth of the teams, we're going to call it 5 through 20 being much better than it felt like they were a season ago as well. Because a team like Florida, all of a sudden, we're going to be seeing them in action. I don't know if I quite want to lay 22.5 to 23.5 with them against South Carolina, but they're playing about as good of college basketball as anyone in the country. NC State has a very golden opportunity against a North Carolina team that's looking to prove that without Caleb Wilson, they're still rock solid as well. It just feels like there's a lot of teams that maybe aren't in that top tier of the sport that can still make a Final Four and a massive run in March.
Absolutely. I mean, right now we're seeing a team like a BYU that was being projected as a top 3 team coming into the season, lingering in that tier, if not even below the 5 to 20 tier, as crazy as that sounds. And the biggest reason why is because there are teams finding ways to eliminate just the talent-driven AAU ball jumper style of offense, because there's more to the sport than that at this level, where talent disparities aren't as crazy as they are in the NBA. And for that reason, to your point, you look 5 through 20, heck, you look from 20 to 35. I think you can find a lot of teams with a lot of value in those sections that can really have upside to win in the tournament. I know last time I was on, I brought up a team in Villanova and Kevin Willard, where obviously we haven't really seen Kevin Willard break the seal past the Sweet 16, but we did see it last year, finally with Maryland. And I feel like this Villanova team is playing better than Maryland was at any point last season. I feel like the growth from that team is very, very impressive. I would be a believer. St. Mary's is in that mix. Even a team like, we actually just saw them in a very tight contested ball game, but I would even put like a Santa Clara in that mix with a lot of upside. And so in those categories, I think we have a really fun field. And down the stretch, again, when you're looking at conference tournaments, when you're looking at the games in the regular season here to finish out, I think you're going to find a lot of really fun betting angles trying to build equity with those teams rather than the teams kind of 1 through 10.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of profit to be made on some of these teams as well. And it is going to be a lot of fun to be able to see them, because many of them are going to be in action action on Tuesday as well. Like, we're going to have Texas Tech as a 7.5-point favorite against Arizona State. I think that that's a team that we are very much taking a look at. A team like a Michigan State, maybe you put them in that top 5, maybe you don't. They're a team in action. Wisconsin versus Ohio State. What are some of the games in particular that you are taking a look at on Tuesday? Because we just talked about there's a lot of really good Tier 2 teams, and many of them are going to be in action on Tuesday, and those that aren't in action on Tuesday probably going to be playing on Wednesday.
Yeah, and what I'll tell you is my favorite games in any college basketball slate are the ones that matter. And the ones that matter truly are the teams that are in the high major level that are on the bubble, and also the teams that are fighting for true seed lines in their mid-major leagues. And one of them that immediately comes to mind in terms of a really big bubble battle is Virginia Tech versus Miami, because I think Mike Young's job secretly is almost sort of on the line this season if they don't make the dance. And I think when you're looking at Miami and how they play, they've been impressive. They have a lot of talent. I think it's been a great year one for this regime. But looking at the other side in Virginia Tech and just knowing how we've already seen Virginia Tech go into Clemson and win outright, then we saw them almost get returned the favor on when it comes to, like a Florida State last time out. I feel like there's going to be this extra layer of get up. And when you're catching 8.5, 9 points, that's going to be one of those bets that I end up betting on the money line for Virginia Tech. I'm going to bet that pretty confidently as well. I'm very looking forward to that game. And if you're going down the line of just other games that truly, truly matter, look at TCU versus UCF out there in the Big 12. TCU's playing incredible ball. UCF is kind of fading. Does that end up being the same story down in Orlando? I tend to think that's going to be the case. And so I'm going to be gravitating toward the TCU, and across the board, whether you're looking at Louisville, SMU, or, North Carolina, NC State, there's a lot of great games here on Tuesday. And I think there's going to be a lot of volume for anybody who likes any particular type of matchup.
Absolutely. It's a 30-game card, which in college basketball, it's not small. It's not necessarily massive. It's very palatable. You've got really, really good games. And you've got a chance to fade Gardner Webb as well, which I always love that too. So we've got a lot of fun there. And Rob, you're doing such an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball. You're dialed in on a little bit of everything. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it is always a pleasure to hop on and talk college hoops with you, my man. And for those who want to follow my bets on a nightly basis, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, my man.
It's always great to be able to get Rob aboard, as every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he's been with me all throughout the college basketball season, and he, much like myself, very much prepared for the stretch run to the NCAA tournament. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday, as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Also does great work over there at Underdog Fantasy as well. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday, as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. Today it's very easy. It's pretty much time order, aside from the Gardner Webb versus Charleston Southern game. That is the lone game that is part of the extra games board that's reserved for smaller conferences. That's a lone smaller conference game, so everything aside from that game is going to be in time order. That game will be at the bottom. So let's get things started. This is 601-602 Boston College on the road against Florida State. The Seminoles are 10.5 to 11.5 point favorites. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total, and I'm going to be in on the under. I set my total at a 142. Now I recognize that this is a Florida State team that is playing very, very fast in terms of total possessions per game, currently 24th in all of college basketball. Boston College, a much more slow and controlled team, about 262nd in terms of total possessions per game, and let's call what it is. This is not a Boston College team that shoots it very well at the free throw line. They're 358th in all of college basketball, outside the top 275 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but I set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to take the points, mainly because this is a Florida State team that they are going to be looking to go bombs away from 3-point range. They attempt 51.4% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range at home. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball, and they're outside the top 300 with that 3-point shooting percentage at home. That's hovering right around about 31.4%. You've got a lot of guys that give you double figures for this team. Actually, 5 different guys that give you 9+ points per contest. Kobe McGee, Martin Somerville have been able to give you 9 points per contest apiece. Main facilitators, Robert McRae, 6 assists, 14.5 points per game, but does turn the ball for 3.8 times per game. Now, I will say this, Florida State is able to win the turnover battle as they've been a top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but Boston College, the one thing they do an okay job of is taking care of the ball. They're a top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a very respectable defense. Boston College, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right now they're checking in 58th in all of college basketball, 44th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. So Florida State team that loves to take a bunch of shots from 3, they're going to have a tough time there. And Florida State is outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage. You only have 2 guys, Elijah Jones along with Alex Steen, that give you over 4 rebounds per game. Steen, 7 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Jones, 12 points, 6 boards, and does throw in there a steal per contest as well. But for Boston College, I do think that they're going to do an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball. Fred Payne, Donald Hand have been able to combine for 29 points per game. Payne shoots about 32.5% per 3. Hand gives you no outside shooting, but throws in there 5 rebounds per game. Broden Kapke has been able to give you 9.5 points, 5.5 boards. He stands 6'10", 6'11", and it's giving you a little bit from the outside. Lukatus is like the lone guy on the roster that shoots about 33% for 3 at 45%, but with the way that this team has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job in terms of just being able to slow games down, they're not going to force any turnovers. Boston College right around 300th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but they do a good job protecting the ball themselves. I think that this turns into a slog of a game that Boston College holds in there on. So set my line at 8. I'm going to take the points with Boston College, and the under set by total 142. 603, 604. Michigan is on the road against Purdue, and Purdue does find themselves as a slim underdog here of 1.5 to 2 points total on this game, 156.5 to 157.5. I did set my line at a 1.5, so 2+. That becomes my buy point on Purdue. Purdue has become a better defensive team. They still have a few warts. They're not a team that's going to put you under duress, and Michigan State, when they've had their, shall we say, issues this year, typically it has been a little bit more with turnovers. They are outside the top 145 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and this is a Purdue team that is going to have the edge with regards to outside shooting. Michigan has honestly been a relatively solid team with their 3-point shooting when they were away from home. Overall, Michigan 89th in the country at 35.4% for 3-point. Actually goes up to 35.5% away from home. But for Purdue, this is a unit that right now they've been able to shoot about 37.8% for 3-point, top 25 mark in the country. They're a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and if you want to just look at raw points scored on a per possession basis, this Purdue team is a top 5 team in the country. As a matter of fact, number 2, because not only do you have a guy in Braden Smith who's able to give you 7+ assists per game, shoots in that neighborhood about 40% from 3-point range, and has been able to supply you with about 4 boards to go along with his 15 points per game. But Fletcher Lawyer off the ball shoots 39% for 3, 13.5 points per game. And then the big men down low, Trey Kaufman-Wren, Oscar Clough, a combined about 16.5 rebounds per game. Now they're going to get it taken to them by a Michigan team that is in the top 10 in all of college basketball with regards to both their 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. For Michigan, Yaxel Lendeborg, Morris Johnson, Ade Merrill. All 3 of these guys are right now giving you at least 7 rebounds per game. Merrill, your main shot blocker, 2.8 blocks, 11.3 points, 7 rebounds. And then you've got Johnson, who's really your most versatile player, shoots 35.5% for 3, block 13.5 points per game, and he's been able to shoot 36% for 3. Lendeborg just does a bit of everything, a steal and a half, a block and a half, 14.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. And Elliot Kadu has done a nice job running this offense a little bit more smoothly, 5.5 assists, and 2.4 turnovers per game. He shoots about 39% from 3-point range. Nabari Burnett has been able to shoot 40% from 3-point range. And what is going to be interesting is going to be the tempo war that we're going to be seeing in this game as well, because Michigan is one of your most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. This team checks in 17th. Meanwhile, you've got a Purdue team that is currently 310th in the country, but I do think that you're going to get some very efficient play. I do think that this is a game that comes down to late game falling, and I trusted Michigan just a little bit more here, but like I said, could only set my line at 1.5, so at 2+, taking the points with Purdue, and here at a 156.5, 157.5, I think that's just, shall we say, slow enough for the under, and Michigan top 20 team in terms of points a lot on a per possession basis, so like the under and the points here with Purdue. 605, 606 on the betting board. It's a battle of Michigan. Eastern Michigan is playing host to Central Michigan. Central Michigan is a underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. Total on this game 142.5 to 143.5. I set my line at 8.5, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Eastern Michigan. It doesn't sound impressive, but Eastern Michigan has been much better on the defensive side of things this year than they were last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Overall, they're checking in about 187th in all of college basketball, which doesn't sound like much, but it's actually been significantly beter when they bet at home. This goes up to 77th in their home games, and that's a big edge on Central Michigan, who's currently 357th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they're away from home. It's a Central Michigan team that has Nathan Clearbot down low, has been supplying 12.5 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. He's a true 7-footer, and then Nick Mullen at 6'10" is able to give you about 4 boards per contest as well. But for Central Michigan, just not a lot of great play with regards to their inside shooting defense. They're outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage for this team. They've been very sloppy with it as well. They're in the neighborhood about 275th with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Tamario Adley along with Logan McIntyre in the backcourt have been a little bit better. They're combining for about 22.5 points per game, and McIntyre now shooting 40% from three-point range. It is a bunch that has been shooting about 36% from three-point range here in conference play, so they've had a little bit of a come up there, but still having all sorts of turnover concerns. Now, this is not an Eastern Michigan team that's going to be going out there and getting like 100 billion turnovers or anything like that, and they are still down Carlos Hardy, who was part of that FBI sting, and he was their number 3 scorer, so you pretty much only have 2 guys on the roster that for the season are averaging over 6.6 points per game. Mohamed Habab along with Edison Patterson, both guys give you about 14.1 to 14.2 points per game, with Patterson 5.5 boards, a steal, 2.5 assists per game, and then Habab, a block and a half, 8 rebounds, only shoots about 26% from 3, and Eastern Michigan, they as a collective shoot 32% from 3, but in the absence of Hart, you've seen Gregory Lawson step up in conference play, shooting 53% from 3. He's giving you about 9 points per contest, so he's been able to help out along the perimeter. It is an Eastern Michigan team that is a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. They've been about a country average team on the boards, which again, it doesn't sound too impressive, but this is a Central Michigan team that they've been getting absolutely destroyed on the boards. They're well outside the top 250 with regards to their defensive rebound percentage and their offensive rebound percentage. As a matter of fact, in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound for opponents, 334th with 33.1% of misses being rebounded. Eastern Michigan not going to call them amazing again, but they're about 157th at home. Teams are only grabbing about 26.2% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Do you think that this is going to be a little bit more of a controlled game? Eastern Michigan about 210th in terms of total possessions per game and outside the top 250 in terms of points per possession. Central Michigan well outside the top 250 themselves in terms of points per possession, and they're a relatively mid-tempo team themselves at about 240th. So set a total of a 140.5. I like the under, and with Eastern Michigan made them an 8.5 point favorite, so I'm willing to lay the 4.5. 607, 608, Northern Illinois. They are on the road against Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo, as they are an 8.5 to a 9 point favorite. And total on this game, it is 147.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Buffalo. I did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points for Northern Illinois. They're just doing an awful job in terms of holding teams to one clean shot. They're allowing teams to grab about 29.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 229th in the country, and they're just getting barbecued in terms of the turnover battle. This Northern Illinois team, 360th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, while Buffalo has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of winning the turnover battle. They're a top 150 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. On defense, they're a top 135 team in terms of generating turnovers, and Northern Illinois, to their credit, they've been okay in terms of generating turnovers, 154th, but that drops outside the top 175 when they're away from home. Northern Illinois, legitimately not a bad 3-point shooting defense. They're getting bludgeoned on the inside, though. Northern Illinois, 342nd in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Buffalo, they themselves are about 329th, but for Northern Illinois, you just have such a fear of them not being able to just put together clean possessions, as you've had 2 guys be able to give you double figures. Makai Valentine, 14 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 35.5% for 3. Dylan Dukaman, he gives you about 12 points, 3 assists per game, but outside of that, really nobody else gives you over 8.5 points per game. You do have Taj Walters, who's now been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. That's been a little bit helpful, but also for Northern Illinois, they're outside the top 285 with their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not to the credit of Northern Illinois, they're a top 125 team in terms of giving themselves second and third chances by offensive rebounds, but you do have a Buffalo team that, even though it's been rough for them on defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team checks in 269th in the country and well outside the top 300 at home. They are a team that they do a nice job in terms of getting their, shall we say, tempo in games, 252nd in terms of total possessions per game, and they're just so efficient on the offensive side of things with Daniel Freitag shooting 38% from 3, 20 points per game. Ryan Sable has done a nice job being able to supply 18 points. He shoots in the high 30s from 3. Buffalo overall 66th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Northern Illinois, a nice hearty 345th. And then for Buffalo, you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but you've got 4 separate guys that give you at least 4.1 rebounds per game. Tim Oba has been able to step up in a big way with a block, 4.2 boards, 8.5 points per game. Noah Batchelor has been able to give you some points, and he shoots 45% from 3-point. Buffalo overall has been one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. Again, with Northern Illinois, they're honestly not the world's worst perimeter defense. They're allowing teams away from home to shoot 31.7% from 3-point. That is a top 75 mark in the country, but I think Buffalo is going to be able to overcome it by getting inside, and for Buffalo, they shoot 38.2% from 3, so did set a total of a 148.5. I think that you get just enough efficiency on offense for the over. So like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 10 with Buffalo, made them a 10.5 point favorite. 6-9, 6-7. Villanova is on the road against Xavier. The X-Men do find themselves as a 4 to a 4.5 point favorite. It's on game between 151 to 151.5. I set a total of a 146. I like the under. Now for Xavier, they're doing a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And to the credit of Xavier, they are doing a lot of the little things well. This is a unit that has not been allowing a lot of second and third chances on the glass. As in terms of defensive rebound percentage for Xavier, right now they are 61st in the country. Villanova, meanwhile, they've been a team that has been allowing those second and third chances. Who are in 47th with regards to defensive rebound percentage. I still did set Villanova as a 4-point favorite. 4.5 is becoming my buy point here on Xavier, mainly because if Villanova does find themselves in a little bit of a nip and tuck spot at the end of the game, I don't necessarily trust them at the free throw line. They're 290th in the country with their free throw shooting percentage at 69.1%. That goes down to 67% away from home. Xavier, they're about 236. They're about 70.7% at the charity stripe. Now, Villanova is going to have by far the best rebounder in this game, as Duke Brandon has been a machine. 12 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. And for Villanova, interestingly, their 3-point shooting percentage defense has been a little bit hit or miss all season long, but away from home, they have been one of the better teams in all of college basketball with that regard. And Villanova, just in terms of raw points allowed on a per possession basis in games played away from home, they do actually ascend into the top 45 in all of college basketball, while being a team that plays at a very slow and controlled pace. Right now, they're 294th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so that's a big reason why I'm in on this total under. And for Villanova, 30.5% is what opponents shoot from 3-point range away from home. Meanwhile, it's a Xavier team that it's been country average, allowing teams to shoot about 34% from 3-point range, and they have to match up with Arcaden Lewis and Tyler Perkins, who have combined for 26 points per game. And Perkins shoots 39% for 3. Bryce Lindsey was really good to start the year, down to about 12 points per game. Hasn't been quite as effective here in conference play. Meanwhile, for Xavier, they've been caroling all the way with Trey Carroll with about 18 points, 5.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. And Xavier has been a solid 3-point shooting team. They're shooting about 36.5% from 3-point range, but they're outside the top 300 with their 2-point shooting percentage, as Xavier at home shoots about 36.2% from 3-point range, overall 36.6% from the outside. You've been able to get a good amount from always right from the outside, which that's a great name. 8 points per contest, shoots 45% from 3. Jovan Misevich is able to give you about 11.5 points per game. I think that that's going to be just enough for them to remain lively, even though they've been very weak on the inside, also being outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I'm total at a 146. I'm in on the under, and at 4.5 plus, taking the points with Xavier. 6'11", 6'12", Miami of Ohio on the road against UMass. UMass is a home underdog of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 164.5 to 165 is the total, and last time these two teams played, UMass, I believe, lost that game by 3 points. Might have been 4, but they held right in there. I think that you get something very similar. I said Miami of Ohio is a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, this is a UMass team that's been very good in terms of guarding the perimeter, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're a top 85 team in the country, and UMass has really had to come up with their 3-point shooting at 36.3%. That is 55th in all of college basketball. Miami of Ohio, as we know, they've been a flamethrower this year. In games played away from home, they shoot 39.8% from 3-point range. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. But let's say that gets taken away and they have to pile drive the ball inside. Miami of Ohio, number 3 in the country with their 2-point shooting percentage as well. This is a UMass defense that very much can be had on the inside. Now, one thing Miami of Ohio doesn't do is grab second and third chances outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but this UMass unit is right now 307th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Miami of Ohio, you just get it from everyone. Even with Evan Opsero missing pretty much all of conference play, you've had each of your top 5 scorers all shoot at least 37% from 3, with them included out, all give you at least double figures, and they've been able to rebound by committee, while Ian Elmore's your top rebounder with 5.9 boards, 12 points per contest. Antoine Woolfolk throws in there 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Peter Suter, 14.5 points, 4.3 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. Miami of Ohio, also a top 95 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. We'll say this for UMass, and this is a big reason why I'm going to be in on the under. So I total 132.5, despite the fact that UMass very much an up-tempo team, top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. They've been very good at home in terms of generating turnovers. Overall, they're about 126th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but that ascends into the top 50 when they are at home. Meanwhile, for Miami of Ohio, and games played away from home in the top 100 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. But let's say that you need to hit free throws to be able to cover this game. For Miami of Ohio, they shoot 76.5% the free throw line. That is a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a UMass unit that they're hovering right around about 300th with that free throw shooting percentage, as they're right around about 67.2%, as a matter of fact, well outside the top 300. Leonardo Batil, though, 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, and then you've got Marcus Banks banking in 39.5% of his threes, 17 points per contest. Kajal Parker has been a 43% three-point shooter, and this is a UMass team that has been a top 50 team in the country with regards to rebound percentage, but again, that weak interior play I think is going to be very costly here along the UMass, turning the ball over more than 13 times per game. So I did some Miami of Ohio as a 4.5 point favorite. One to lay up to 4 with them, and in on the under. So I total 162.5. 613, 614. If you got Kent State, they're going to be on the road against Bowling Green. Bowling Green, a 1.5 to 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 150.5. Me, my total, 153.5. I'm liking the over, mainly because you've got a Kent State team that's playing at warp speed, 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bowling Green under Todd Simon, they want to play fast. They're not out of control fast. They're about 111th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Bowling Green group that has been solid with regards to their offense. I wouldn't call it amazing, but hey, you know what? They're about 164th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Kent State overall with regards to their offense, they're 100th in terms of points per possession, but they're averaging about 16.4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home, and Kent State has some very demonstrative three-point shooting splits, as right now at home, they're shooting 39.3%, 31st in the country, away from home, 29.2%, 325th, and you've got a Bowling Green team that's done a great job in terms of generating turnovers, 47th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, while Kent State 311th in terms of their ball security. Now, I do like the fact that Zion Medley has been able to give you about 6.5 assists per game. He throws in there 10 points per contest. He's seen to come up with his three-point shooting to about 32%. I think you got Morgan Safford giving you about 13.5 points, shoots 35% from three-point range, but with Medley, 3.2 turnovers per game. Now, Delreco Gillespie, your top rebounder in this game, 19 points, 11.9 rebounds per game, but with this Kent State team, even with having him, they're still outside the top 125 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 100 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage as well. They should be able to have a nice advantage on the glass. They've been a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage, but Bowling Green also a top 95 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage as well. And with Bowling Green, they've got Javante Campbell, who's giving you 3.3 steals, 5 assists, 5 boards, 18.5 points per game. Mayor Wool has been able to shoot 40% from 3. He throws in there about 11.5 points per game. Santown, 6.5 rebounds per game. It's a Bowling Green team that's just very well-rounded in general. They're not giving up second chances. They're doing a great job generating those turnovers. I think that allows them to get the job done here. Semi-line at a 5.5, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Bowling Green, and I like the over. Semi-total at a 153.5, 615, 616. You've got North Carolina on the road against NC State, and NC State is a favorite here of 7 to 7.5 points. So on this game, it's 158.5, and right now, the concern for North Carolina is all sorts of injuries. You know that you're going to have Caleb Wilson out for quite some time, and he has been rock solid, 20 points, about 8 rebounds per game. But also a little bit shocking was the fact that Henry Vassar, who has been a double-double machine for this North Carolina team as well, he was out in that game against Pittsburgh as well. Those are your top 2 players in terms of points and rebounds per game. Vassar is officially listed as questionable, so there's a chance that he can play in this game, but even if he does, you have to question whether or not he's going to be 100% or not. But even knowing that, I'm still on the points with North Carolina, because you're going to be seeing a lot of Jaren Stevenson in this game, and when he had to really take hold of the front court on Saturday against Pittsburgh, had 19 points, 3 rebounds in that game, so he was able to do solid job on that front. Additionally, you're probably going to be seeing a little bit more of the, in my opinion, just underutilized transfer in Jonathan Boom Boom Powell, who I think that he's got a little bit of upside last season when he was over at West Virginia, gave that team 8.5 points, few rebounds, and was able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and Seth Trimble has really been stepping it up in the backcourt for this team as well, up to about 14 points per game. Here in conference play only, shooting about 35.5% from three-point range, and it is an NC State team that has been very, shall we say, lackadaisical with regards to their defense. Now, they're a team that has been able to do an okay job in terms of generating turnovers, 64th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but overall in terms of points allowed, out on a per possession basis. This team is just 115th in the country. We'll say they've been much better with regards to their defense when they've been at home, allowing about 15.9 points fewer per 100 possessions than when they're away from home. But interestingly for NC State, they're 21st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. If you look at them in games played away from home, they're tied with Purdue at number 1 in the country. They fall outside the top 55 when they are at home, though, and NC State, name of the game for them, has been three-point shooting. They've been a top 25 team with regards to that outside shooting. Right now, you've got Kadir Copeland and Van Allen Lubin leading the way in terms of scoring, with both giving you about 13.5 points per game to go along. Darian Williams and his 14 points, 5 rebounds per game, and Copeland, 6.8 assists, 1.8 steals. NC State has been solid in terms of taking care of the ball, top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but weak on the inside with regards to their defense. Outside the top 170 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for this North Carolina group, I recognize that the defense does take a little bit of a drop-off when they're away from home, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they've been 43rd in the country, and they're really a good interior defense. They're a top 10 team in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They've also been able to do a good, nice job in terms of guarding the perimeter as well. Right now, North Carolina allowing teams to shoot only about 34% from three-point shot. That goes to 40.7% away from home, 30.6% at home. I do think that irons out a little bit. I do think that NC State's ability to be able to knock down outside shots is going to be able to help you out to the over. So I did set my total at a 159.5, but I do think that North Carolina, with all the backcourt play that they've got, with still having some depth in the front court, even with Visar right now dealing with a little bit of an injury and probably going to be less than 100% for this game, and Wilson being out, I think that they do hold in there. So I set my line at a 5.5. Won't take the points with North Carolina, and I'm going to be in on the over as well. So my total 159.5, 617, 618. You've got South Carolina on the road against Florida, and Florida is a favorite here of 22.5 to 23.5 points. 151.5 is the total, and I made South Carolina the underdog of 19.5 points, so I'm going to be in on the points. Now, for South Carolina, this is a group that is going to be completely blasted on the glass. For Florida, they're number 1 in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage, second in the country in terms of percentage of the missed shots that become an offensive rebound. South Carolina is 277th in the country with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but hey, the one thing that this South Carolina team has done an amazing job of is being able to knock down their free throws. Their 79% free throw shooting is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball, and this has been a team that's been able to do a lot of the little things well. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, albeit they don't put you under duress with regards to those turnovers either, and it's still a Florida team that at home is shooting 28.6% from three-point range. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball, and for Florida, they're a country average team in terms of putting you on the free throw line, neither here nor there. Now, again, they're going to have a massive advantage down low. Ruben Chinyelu, 11.7 points, 11.8 rebounds per game. Alex Condon, 13.5 points, 8 boards. Thomas Haw, 17.5 points per game. That's all big, but Thomas Haw is the lone out of your top 5 scorers right now that shoots above 27% from three-point range, and Urban Clausar actually shoots 39% from three. I'm not sure why they don't have him starting at this point, but that's a discussion for a different day. For Florida, they're going to be rock solid down low, top 30 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they will give up a little bit from the outside, and I fully recognize that this is a South Carolina team that has not been able to knock down their shots all season long, but they are a team that is certainly going to be hoisting up those outside shots, which honestly I think is a good thing against this Florida team, as South Carolina right now, they're taking about 44% of their field goal attempts from three-point range. That's a top 100 mark in the country. Again, South Carolina, they're only shooting about 29.2% from three-point range away from home, but you've got a guy, Michi Johnson, that's able to give you about 16.5 points, 4 assists. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. Mongolian Mike has good versatility with about 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. They've had Eli Ellis be dealing with a little bit of injury, but he should be good to go in this game. That's a guy that's been able to spy for you about 9.5 points, throws in there a pair of assists per game as well, and I do think that South Carolina does enough with regards to their backcourt play in terms of taking care of the ball to be able to hold in this one, and I do think that with Florida being an up-tempo team, top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, and getting those second and third chances, they get an over. So I told 153.5, like the over, and I'm willing to take the north of 20 points here with South Carolina. 619, 620. TCU is on the road against Central Florida. Central Florida is a favorite of anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 points. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total. Made TCU the underdog of 4 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Central Florida. Central Florida has been a really good team on offense this year in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and have really been able to do a good job with regards to their outside shooting. As for Central Florida as a collective, they are shooting over 36% from three-point range. As a top 35 mark in the country, goes up to 37.8% when they're at home, and they should be able to do a nice job on the glass as well in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound. The Central Florida team is 40th in the country, specifically at home. 37.8% of their misses become an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, TCU only grabs about 27.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound away from home. Now, TCU is going to have the advantage with regards terms of the turnover battle, as they are 48th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And this is a Central Florida team that can get a little bit sloppy with the ball, but you do have a guy in Themis Folks that, even though he is going to give you about 3 or so turnovers per game, he still has been able to dole out 7 assists, 13.5 points. He's been shooting 44% from three-point range. You've got Riley Kugel, who's been able to throw in there 14.5 points, shoots 38.5% from three-point range. And it's not like the turnover battle is awful with regards to the Central Florida team. They're still a top 175 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Where they can really get blasted is down low. The Central Florida team is outside the top 260 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Just overall, Central Florida is outside the top 165 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And neither of these teams are playing at like a ridiculous pace, but both of these teams are looking to push some tempo. TCU 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Central Florida about 95th in the country. And for TCU, they've been a relatively pedestrian offense as they're a country average team with their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And your main guy has been David Punch, 14 points, 7 boards, 2 blocks per contest. He's solid down low. And then Xavier Edmonds shoots 40% for 3, 12.5 points, 6 rebounds. He's been able to have Jaden Pierre launch 39% from 3-point, while Brock Harding does a good job keeping things clean. 6 assists, a fewer than 2.5 turnovers per game. But for TCU, I do think that in the end, the fact that this team does give up quite a bit from the outside, they are outside the top 200 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, allows Central Florida and all those outside shooters to be able to get the job done. So I'm going to be willing to lay it here with Central Florida, made them a 4-point favorite. And with this total, I did set mine at a 152. I do think that you get quite a few turnovers and just enough to be able to hold it under. So in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Central Florida, 621, 622. You've got Akron on the road against Western Michigan. Western Michigan, a 13.5 to a 14.5 point home underdog. 159.5 to 116.5 is the total. I set my total at a 165. So I'm going to be in on the over. You've got an Akron team that has been really good with their offense. They are 6th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and 61st in terms of total possessions per game. So they are very much looking to crank up tempo. Davari Johnson has been the top scorer with 20.5 points, 5 assists per contest. Now with Akron, I could only set them as a 12-point favorite. Not saying that Akron is by any means terrible with regards to their defense, but leaves a little bit of something to be desired there. Their main forte has been generating turnovers. They're a top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but overall about 140th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now Western Michigan 321st in the country, but I will say they are giving up 16.1 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. They're going to have a tough time matching up with all these good 3-point shooters. So among your top 6 scorers for Akron, all but one of them shoot at least 37.8% for 3-point range. Armani Lyles, 14.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. Eric Mahaffey, he gives you 8 points, an assist and a half, 6 rebounds. He shoots 41% from 3-point. So you've got weapons upon weapons, but justice, I think, will be served. Justice Williams, he was missing for the first half of the season for Western Michigan, missed 10 plus games. He's back. He's giving you about 15.5 points per game, shoots 39% from 3-point range. Jaden Brewer's been able to throw in there about 12.5 points per contest as well. It's a Western Michigan team that is now shooting about 35% from 3. That's a top 150 mark in the country. They're struggling on the inside. They're outside the top 275 with both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Western Michigan is not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 315 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Lots of clean possessions for Akron in what is going to be very much an up-and-down game, but I do think that Justice Williams gives this team just enough offensive punch to hang in there, and what I think is going to be a slugfest of scoring, especially with Western Michigan being a solid team, a top 175 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. So made a line of 12. I'm willing to take the points with Western Michigan and the over. Semi-total 165.5, 623, 624. Louisville is on the road against SMU, and SMU is a home underdog here of 3.5 to 4.5 points total on this game. It is 167 to 167.5, and I said SMU as the 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line, mainly because with Louisville, they're just such a hit or miss team from 3-point range. Overall, they shoot 35.7% from 3-point range, 37% at home, about 33.3% away from home, and they just take so many of their shots from 3-point range. For Louisville, they take 53% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range. That is 4th in all of college basketball, and this is certainly an SMU team that is going to be looking to be able to take some threes as well, but they're only about 283rd in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3, despite the fact that they shoot about 37.8% from 3-point range. That's a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. It is an SMU defense that certainly leaves a lot to be desired. Currently, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they check in 145th in the country, albeit they give up 10 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. Meanwhile, Louisville has been 28th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and a top 40 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, as you've had Ryan Conville lead the way in terms of scoring, 18 points per contest, shoots 36% from 3, but also throws in their 5 rebounds per game. Sandera Frew has been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 10 points per game. Javon Hadley gives you about 5 boards per contest as well. So these guys have done a really nice job in tandem, as for Louisville, top 25 team in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And in a pressure spot, they do shoot a little bit over 77% of the free throw line. That's a top 30 mark in the country. Getting back Mikal Brown and his 5 assists per game has been massive for the team. But for SMU, they've got a really good facilitator in Kevin Miller. Refuse to call him Boopy, but he boops teams with 19 points, 6.8 assists per game. It's an SMU team that has been relatively okay in terms of guarding the 3-point line, as their main issue has been on the inside. This is an SMU team that has been well outside the top 150 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, or well outside the top 100 with regards to defensive rebound percentage as well. But when it comes to being able to guard the 3-point line, I think SMU can hold their own. They're about 116th, allowing teams to shoot about 32.6% from three-point range. Meanwhile, it's a Louisville team that's allowing teams to shoot about 32.5% from three-point range, so they've been able to do a pretty solid job on that front as well. But having Jerome Pierre give you 17.5 points, he shoots 37% for three. PJ Edwards, 13 points, 2.5 steals, 5 assists, 6 rebounds per game. SMU is really going to be looking to crank up the tempo in this one. And Louisville, as we know, they're not a slow team, 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, SMU is 36th in the country. I do think that you're going to get an interesting up and down game. I think that's perhaps gone a little bit too far because, again, Louisville's just not the same 3-point shooting team when they're away from home. They can be a little bit hit or miss. I think that SMU is going to be able to hold up there, and I do think that with SMU also having Samaya Yedoglu down, they'll give you about 10.5 points, 8 rebounds per game, that they're going to be able to do a little bit or better job on the glass than what their metrics would indicate. So I do like SMU in this spot on the money line. I set them as a 1.5 point favorite, and I like the under. I set my total at a 165.5. 6.5, 6.6. Ball State is on the road against Ohio. Ohio is a favorite here of 9.5 points. Total is 142.5 to 143.5. Made a total of a 140, so I'm in on the under. You've got an Ohio team that has been playing relatively up-tempo, 82nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Ball State is not. Ball State is 326th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I recognize that neither of these defenses are great. Right now for Ball State, 234th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Ohio's actually been a little bit worse as they're checking in 259th, and there is one thing that Ball State has been able to do a relatively okay job of. They're able to generate turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, right now they're 62nd in all of college basketball, but that does take a pretty big drop off when they're away from home. Away from home, they do fall outside the top 80, and this has been a Ohio team that has been awful with their 3-point shooting all season long. Right now for Ohio, they are shooting 29.5% from 3-point. That is 345th in all of college basketball. Ball State, 30.1%. That's 335th, and that falls to 28.5% away from home. But Ohio, at the very least, has a semblance of an interior offense. I'm not calling it amazing here or anything like that, but they're 58th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Ball State is 339th, and this is a Ball State team that's well outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, with right now having one player on the roster that's giving you over 4.5 rebounds per game. That'd be your main guy in Imani Ziegler, 12 points, 5 rebounds per game, and then you've been able to have about 4 boards and 4 points per game out of Mason Jones. Davion Hill is able to give you about 12.5 points per game, but I mean, right now, among your healthy players for this team as well, each of your top 4 scorers are shooting less than 31% from 3-point range, so I have a feeling that this is going to be just a gross slog of a game. And for Ohio, you do have the top player in this game. That'd be Jackson Pavlovetsky. He's their main point guard with about 5 assists, 17 points per contest, and then Aiden Hadaway gives you 7.2 rebounds per game. He's a lone guy in this game that gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game, and then AJ Shelton, Dior Connors are mixers and shakers. Connors just has not been what we were hoping he would be after coming over from Appalachia State, where he was shooting 40% for 3 down to about 30% through this season, but Shelton is now shooting 37.5% from 3-point range, and it is an Ohio team that I think is going to be able to use that interior presence to their advantage. Now, they too are outside the top 10 with regards to rebound percentage, but at the very least, they've got functional rebounders. Ohio, they've also been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, so I think that there's going to be plenty of dead possessions, but Ohio is able to control this game on the inside. Set Ohio as a favorite of 10 points, so we'll lay up to 9.5 with them, and I like the under. Semi total at a 140, 627, 628. St. Louis is going to be on the road against Rhode Island. Rhode Island, a home underdog of 10 to 11 points, 151 to 151.5 is the total, and I made this line 12, so I'm going to be willing to lay with St. Louis. This St. Louis team is just so complete. I mean, you just take a look at these guys, and they're doing everything well. They're a top 5 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, which, I mean, you figure with a Josh Schertz coach team that they're going to be really good on that front, but they're also really good on defense. They're 8th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and in games played away from home, that goes up to number 2. And for St. Louis, you know that you're going to be able to get a lot out of Robbie Avila, Avila, he's right now your top scorer, but it's not just Robbie Avila, as right now this team has 8 different guys between 7.8 and 12.4 points per game, and Avila is not even leading the team by that much. 12.5 points, 4.4 boards, 4.5 assists, shoots 40% per 3, but Trey Green shoots 47% per 3 with his 12 points per game. Deion Brown, Amari McCautry are your top 2 rebounders with 5.5 and 5.6 rebounds per game apiece. They both give between 10.7 to 10.8 points per game. Quentin Jones has been able to shoot 39% per 3. Ishan Sharma has been able to shoot 43% from 3 points. You just have depth upon depth. On the flip side for Rhode Island, this is a unit that really gives it up from 3-point range. Right now, they're allowing teams to shoot over 35% from 3-point range. That's right around about 300th in all of college basketball. Strong with their inside play. They've been a top 80 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. And this Rhode Island team, name of the game for them is turnovers, because they are a team that's having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. On defense, they are actually 12th in the country in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis. And that's very much a home and road split that is very, very equal. And if there has been one issue for St. Louis this season, they did have very early on during this season a lot of turnover issues. They seem to have cleaned those up quite a bit, and for Rhode Island, you are going to have a pair of guys that are going to be able to do a nice job in terms of putting points up on the board, and Tyler Cochran along Jonah Hinton. Hinton is in at with 13.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Cochran 15 points, 3 steals, 5.5 boards, but they really don't shoot it well from 3. With Rhode Island, you've got Jamari Tripp shooting 41% from the outside, pretty much a lone out of your top 7 scorers that shoots above 33% from 3, and I just think that this is too complete of a St. Louis team in this spot, even though you do have a Rhode Island team that has been a top-to-earn team with regards to their rebound percentage. So, circumstance where I set my line at 12, I'm going to be willing to lay with St. Louis. You've got a Rhode Island team that, by the way, is looking to play super slow. St. Louis, obviously, looking to play faster. First, in terms of total possessions per game, Rhode Island 3 on second. I think that does just enough to keep you under semi-total 150, so in on the under to go along with St. Louis, 629, 630. Virginia Tech is on the road against Miami. Miami is an 8.5-point favorite, 150.5 is the total, and for Miami, set them as an 8.5-point favorite. I was seeing some 8s out there a little bit earlier. At an 8, that's my max lay here with Miami, as Miami should have a very nice advantage on the glass. Right now, they're a top 40 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and for Virginia Tech, in terms of percentage of missed shots to become an offensive rebound, they rank right around about 240th in the country for opponents. They're allowing opponents to grab 30+% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Now, I do think that gets better moving forward, as much of that was due to the fact that Toby Lawal was missing for about 9 games. He's been given this team 12 points, main rebounder with about 9 rebounds per game, and then you got Amani Hansberry, 14.5 points, 8 rebounds per game, but I do think that you get an efficient offensive game. Virginia Tech's a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and a relatively good outside shooting team against a Miami team that is 240th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. For Virginia Tech, you've got Nicolas Avadeas, who's able to give you 12 points, 5 assists. He's been able to do a pretty solid job from the outside, and for Virginia Tech, in games played away from them, they're shooting about 36% from 3-point range. That is a top 65 mark in the country. Additionally, you've been able to have some of the, shall we say, ancillary guys be able to step up in a big way. I like what I've been seeing out of Jaden Schutt, 8.5 points. He shoots 42% from 3-point range. Ben Hammond shoots 42.5% from the outside, 12.5 points per game. Meanwhile, for Miami, you're not going to have as much outside shooting, but you do have a very nice interior presence, as Ernest Uday is just a guy that does a great job on the defensive side of things, 9.5 boards, a block, 7 points per game, and then Malik Renew is really that do-it-all guy, 20 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 36.5% from 3-point range, but Miami as a whole, they're only shooting about 33% from 3. Again, they're going to be able to absolutely dominate on the glass, but one concern that you do need to have with this team is that they do shoot just 67.2% of the free throw line. That is outside the top 330 in all of college basketball. That said, I do think that they're going to be able to shut it down inside. They're a top 30 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and it is a Virginia Tech team that has been giving up quite a bit on the defensive side of things in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This team is well outside the top 125, and they're also outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So 8 or less, 1 to lay with Miami, and like the over, semi-total at a 154.5. 631, 632. George Washington, our nation's first president, is on the road against VCU, and VCU finds themselves as about a 7 to a 7.5 point favorite, and your total, it is between 163.5 to a 164, and right now, we're seeing this come down to a 6.5, but even at the 6.5, I'd be willing to take the points with George Washington. Set them as a 6-point dog. So 6.5 is that minimum buy point. Now for George Washington, outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage away from home, but this has also been a team that's been very good offensively away from home. Away from home, this team is a top 35 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, with Rafael Castro give you about 16 points, a block and a half, 2 steals, 9 rebounds per game. Very complete player. And then you've got some good 3-point shooting with Trey Autry, 38.5% three-point shooter, 10.5 points. Garrett Johnson, 13 points, 4 boards. So really like the way that these guys are able to come together. And even though this is a team that's going to very much give it up on the inside, they're also a really good team in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. As for George Washington, they are currently 44th in the country overall with their two-point shooting percentage, but in games played away from them, that does ascend into the top 25. Meanwhile, you've got a VCU team that is also going to give up a few good looks from three-point range. With this VCU defense, they've been about a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. George Washington right around about 100th, but for VCU at home, they're allowing teams to shoot about 34% from three-point range. That is outside the top 200 in all of college basketball, so that means some good looks for this George Washington team, and it is a George Washington team that needs to do a better job in terms of taking care of the ball, outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a VCU bunch that has been able to find that go-to scorer in Terrence Hill. He's been supplying 14.5 points, 2.7 assists, and is now shooting 39% from three-point. For a team that as a whole, they're very equal to George Washington with regards to their three-point shooting percentage right now. For VCU, they shoot about 36.4% from three-point. That checks in number 51 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for George Washington, they're more in that neighbor, about 35.5%, but that goes up to 36.7% away from home. And then you've had Lisa Djokovic at 6'10", provide good versatility, 13.5 points, 6 boards. He shoots 36% from three-point. Jadarian Tracy shoots about 38.5% from the outside. And both of these teams are looking to play fast, but not necessarily aggressively fast. 125th is where George Washington is in terms of total possessions per game. VCU is about 105th. I do think that you get some good offensive efficiency, and I do think that this is a game close enough for late game fouls. VCU shoots about 74.2% at the free throw line. You've got a George Washington team that they're more around about 73.5%, so again, relative equals here. So set a line of 6, won't take 6.5 plus for George Washington, and made my total 164, so 163.5, my max buy point on the over to go, along with our nation's first president. 633, 634, Wisconsin is on the road against Ohio State, and the Ohio State University is currently a 1-to-1.5 point underdog. 158.5 to 159.5 is the total, and I made a total of 155.5. I do like the under. It's a Wisconsin team that they love to go bombs away from three-point range. They're a top 15 team in the country with regards to percentage of their shots that come from three, and legitimately they've shot it well from three-point range away from home at about 36%. That is a top 75 mark in the country, and for Ohio State, they're going to be without their number 2 scorer in John Mobley. He was averaging 15 points, shot 40% from three-point range, so that hampers an offense that has been relatively mid-tempo. They're not necessarily aggressive as Wisconsin. They are looking to push a bit more tempo. 101st in terms of total possessions per game. Ohio State more on 205th, but for Ohio State, they've been a very good perimeter defense all season long, allowing teams to shoot 31% from three-point range. That is a top 55 mark in the country. While for Ohio State, they've been a pedestrian three-point shooting team. They've been much better on the inside with their offense. They're a top 30 team with their two-point shooting percentage, with Bruce Shorten supplying 19.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. Devin Royal's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Currently, with Mobley being out due to injury, it means that for Ohio State, each of their top 5 scorers that are going to be active for this game are giving you at least 4 rebounds per game. So they do a good job on that front. Again, not a team that's necessarily going to light you up from 3. And Ohio State really doesn't even grab for themselves second and third chances. Ohio State is outside the top 200 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they are a free throw shooting team of 78.5%. So a Wisconsin team that's in the top 20 with regards to their free throw shooting percentage, that's going to be matched. And the one thing that Wisconsin does a really good job of on defense, they don't allow second and third chances. Top 35 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now Wisconsin is going to give it up on the inside. They're about 200th in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You do have Nolan Winter supplying about 13.5 points, 9 rebounds per game, and then the two main guys in the backcourt, Nick Boyd, John Blackwell, they combine for 39.6 points per game between the two of them. They shoot about 37.5% from three-point range, and Austin Rapp was dealing with a little bit of injury. They've gotten him back. He's been able to supply about 9.5 points per game, and like I said, both of these teams in the top 20 with regards to free throw shooting percentage. Wisconsin, a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but Ohio State's not looking to do a whole heck of a lot of that, and I do think that with Ohio State having a just edge on the interior, and I think that you could get a little bit of fall man theory as well. I recognize that this is the second game that Ohio State is dealing with the injury to Mobley, but I think that the other guys are going to be able to step up here like Christoph Tilly and company, and I do think that Ohio State on their own floor in a revenge spot gets the job done against Wisconsin and looks to slow this game down. Semi total 155.5, like the under, and Ohio State here on the money line. 635, 636. Southeast Missouri State is on the road against UT Martin, and UT Martin is a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite. Total on this game 140.5 to 141, and with UT Martin made them the 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now it's a UT Martin team that has not been able to light it up from 3-point range themselves. They should at home 26% from three compared to 35.4% away from home. I think that that's going to be ironing out sooner rather than later, but they're also a top 30 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and overall, they're a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Southeast Missouri State, they shoot about 32.5% from three-point range away from home compared to 29.9% at home, and it is a UT Martin team that has been outside the top 340 in terms of ball security. They turn the ball over more than 14 times per game, and Southeast Missouri State, good team in terms of generating turnovers, 68th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. UT Martin has been even better, 57th in the country, so you've got a pair of teams that have been able to do a great job on that front, and it's a Southeast Missouri State team that's playing with some tempo, 151st in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for UT Martin, they're just 296th, but I do think that you're going to be able to get a game that's close enough for late game filling, so I did set a total here of a 142.5 right now, seeing this more in that neighborhood about 140.5, 141. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over, and for Southeast Missouri State, one thing that they've been able to do a relatively solid job of as well, while they do generate a bunch of turnovers, they're pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball as well. Top 225 team in terms of ball security. Hard to trust in them in a tight spot, though, because they do shoot just 68.5% at the free throw line. Luke Almendover, 14.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 34% for three. BJ Ward, 34% three-point shooter. Brandon Terry, 35% three-point shooter. And Ward and Terry combined to give you about 21.5 points per game. And for Southeast Missouri State, while they do a great job in terms of not allowing second and third chances, they don't grab a lot of second and third chances for themselves, but they are a top 125 team in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for the UT Martin bunch, they dealt with a lot of injuries to begin the season, but now they've been able to have a nice come up, and they're a top 35 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they themselves a top 150 team with their own two-point shooting percentage. Andreja Bramovic has been able to give you 14.5 points, 8 boards, shoots 37% from three-point. Mateus Denises has been a 38% three-point shooter, so I do think that they're going to be able to find a little bit more moving forward. Pedro Santos has been able to give you 7 points. He throws in there 4 rebounds per game. There's a lot of mixing and shaking. Now, again, with this UT Martin team, much like Southeast Missouri State, bad at the free throw line, 67.2% at the free throw line, but that said, it is a UT Martin team that I feel like is going to be able to do just enough to be able to get the job done in this game because they do such a great job on the inside. And the one thing that UT Martin has going for them on offense, they're one of the best teams in terms of giving themselves second and third chances in all of college basketball. In terms of percentage of their mid shots that result in an offensive rebound, 11th in the country. So I did set my total here out of 142.5, like the over, and with UT Martin, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them. 637, 638. UCLA is going to be on the road against Michigan State. Michigan State finds themselves as a good size favorite here of 8.5 to 9 points, and your total is between 138.5 to 139. I'm actually going to be willing to take the points with UCLA. I did set them as a underdog of 8 points. Neither of these teams are going to be looking to push a lot of tempo as right now for Michigan State. In terms of total possessions per game, 257th, more around 289th. For UCLA, and for UCLA, the big key for them is being able to generate a few turnovers. As Michigan State, with their defense, they have been incredible. They're a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but not really a team that's going to put you under duress. UCLA has been pretty solid with that regard. They're 79th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. The big issue that you do have with this UCLA team, they're pretty weak on the inside. UCLA right now, 258th in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and for Michigan State, they've got some very wild home and road splits with regards to their three-point shooting. Obviously, Michigan State has been solid down low. They're a top 30 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, with their own two-point shooting percentage, more around about 103rd, and with Michigan State, with regards to how they shoot from the outside, away from home, they are shooting 38.8%. That falls at 31.3% when they are at home. And then for UCLA, this has been a great outside shooting team at 38.1%. That's a top 20 mark in the country. They've been dealing with the Sky Clark injury, who's been really one of the best three-point shooters in all of college basketball, but in his absence, you've seen Donovan Dent do a nice job in terms of taking ownership of the offense. 7 assists, 13.5 points per game, not a great three-point shooter, but you've got Tyler Billadu, who shoots 45% from 3 with 18 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You've had Trent Perry shoot 44.5% from 3, throws in there 12.5 points per contest. UCLA pretty solid in terms of getting to the free throw line and shoots 76.5% at the free throw line. That is a top 55 mark in the country. Meanwhile, Jeremy Fears has been one of the best point guards in all of college basketball. Right now, he's doling out 9.2 assists, 15 points. Not a great three-point shooter, but again, the guys around him have been solid. Kurt Tang shoots 35% from 3 with 7 points per contest. Jackson Kaler does it all. 12.5 points, throws in there a block, 9 rebounds, shoots 41% from 3 points for a Michigan State team that has also been a pretty good perimeter defense as well. The line teams to shoot 31.5% from 3 points. That's a top 16 mark in all of college basketball. They're the number 1 team in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so there's not going to be a lot of second and third chances, but again, they're not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 275 in terms of generating turnovers, and and I think that that's just enough for this UCLA team to hold in there. I do think that this is going to be a game where you're not going to get a lot of second and third chances, but I do think that UCLA is going to be able to do a good job in terms of their perimeter play to be able to hold in this game. So I set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to take the points with UCLA. I think that's a slow down game as well, made by total 136, like the under, 639, 640. Wyoming is going to be playing us to Fresno State, and Fresno State is an underdog of 8.5 to 9.5 points, 147.5 to 148.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 142. I like the under. Wyoming has really seen a dip with regards to their tempo. When it was Christmas time on December 25th, they were 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're now down to 242nd. If you splice it out, they're outside the top 300 since Christmas in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, it's a Fresno State team that's about 118th in terms of total possessions per game. They're fast, but they're not warp speed fast, and they're not very efficient on offense. Fresno State turns 72nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Their games just don't involve a lot of 3-point shots made. Fresno State is actually 14th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at less than 30%. Meanwhile, they themselves shoot less than 32% from 3-point. You're outside the top 250 with that regard. Jake Heidbreder has been your main scorer, 17.5 points per game, shoots 32.5% per 3, and does make 89.5% of their free throws, so that's pretty solid. Zayon Collins is be able to give you 12 points, 4.7 assists per game, but for Fresno State, they're also not taking care of the ball as well. Over 14 turnovers per game if you look at turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. This team is right now checking in 301st in the country. Wyoming, they've been neither here nor there. They're a team that's going to give it up a little bit, but they're not doing the world's worst job in terms of taking care of it, about 186th. And with this Wyoming group, you've been having this team do a really good job by committee on the glasses. You don't have really anyone on the roster that gives you above 5.5 rebounds per game, but for Wyoming, they've been 50th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. Sear Meyer has been really the do-it-all guy for this team with about 13 points, pair of assists, 5.5 boards, and he shoots 39% from 3-point. Caden Bennett, 10 points, 5 boards. He throws in there about 3 assists per game, and then Lelon Walker is your top scorer with 15 points per game. Wyoming shoots about 33% from 3, just outside the top 200 with that regard, and they've been vulnerable on the inside. They're outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Fresno State country average team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, though, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a sloppier game with Fresno State also being a top 75 team in terms of generating turnovers. So set a line of 6. I think that Fresno State holds in there in elevation, so I'm going to be in on the points with Fresno State, and I like the under, so my total at a 142, 641, 642. Georgia is going to be on the road against Kentucky, and Big Blue Nation does find themselves as a favorite here of 6.5 to 7 points. 161.5 is the total. Made a total of 163.5. I like the over. Georgia is looking to play at warp speed right now. In terms of total possessions per game, this team is a team that ranks second in the country. Kentucky, they've been more of a mid-tempo team this season. In terms of total possessions per game, they're right around about 172nd in the country. They've been sped up a little bit more here in conference play, and the one thing that Georgia does a great job of, generating turnovers. Top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and it's a Kentucky team that's had all sorts of issues with their offense, but they do grab about 34.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound at home. That's a top 55 mark in the country, and even for all the issues that Kentucky has had this year, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're still 45th in the country, mainly because they have been a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Now, on the flip side for Georgia, you've got Jeremiah Wilkerson, who's gives you 17 points per game, shoots 33.5% per 3, and Marcus Millender, along Cannon Catchings, they combine for about 22.5 points per game. Between the two of them, they shoot about 35.5% from 3 points, but for Kentucky, they are going to be able to get all sorts of second and third chances because this Georgia team is just giving it up with regards to their second and third opportunities, as Georgia, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they're allowing teams to grab about 32.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 323rd in the country. Now, they make up for that with having Semetro Surreal give you about 2.5 blocks per contest. You also get about 1.8 blocks out of Justin Abson. They actually lead the country in block shots per game, but Malachi Moreno, I think, has a nice advantage here for Kentucky, as he's been able to do a nice job as a freshman, supplying you with about 5.5 boards, throws in there about 8.5 points per game, and then additionally, you've got Mohamed Diabate, who's been able to give you about 8.5 points, 5 boards, and Ortega Owe. Here in conference play, he's really been able to find it. Overall for the season, shoots 33% per 3 with 17 points per game. In conference games alone, he gives you more like 20 points per contest, and you've had Colin Chandler in conference play actually shoot 46.5% from 3 points. He's your number 3 scorer with 10 points per game. Denzel Aberdeen, about 12.5 points per contest. do think that Kentucky taking care of the ball is going to be big here, but in a pressure spot, they do shoot just 72.5% the free throw line, and I think that this game is going to be close enough for late fellas. So I set a line of 6.5. 7 is my minimum buy point here on Georgia, but it is a buy point. I think they get it up and down game, so set my total at a 163.5. Also in on the over 643, 644. Baylor is on the road against Kansas State. Kansas State is a 4 to 4.5 point home underdog. So on this game, it is 161.5. Set a total of a 161. I'm in on the under, and for Kansas State, I'm very curious to see if they change their tempo. They're a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Kansas State team that they've been a good three-point shooting team at about 36.4%, top 65 mark in the country. But to show for it, they're still about 158th in the country in terms of points per possession because they've been well outside the top 230 with regards to ball security, as it's been pretty much PJ Haggerty and a bunch of dudes. Haggerty, amazing, 23 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, shoots 36% from 3, but with Abdi Bashir deal with an injury, you only have 2 other double-figure scorers, Nate Johnson and David Castillo. They combine for about 22.5 points per game. Both shoot 38.3% from 3. Cam McGriff, 9.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. Nobody else on the roster gives you over 4.3 points per game, and outside of Mr. Haggerty, nobody else gives you over 5 rebounds per game. But again, with Baylor, it just feels like the James Nanji edition killed this team. With Baylor, they've really slowed themselves down in conference play as well. In non-conference play, on January 1st, they were ranking about 60th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're down to about 130th, and in conference play alone, they're only averaging about 72.2 points per game. Conference play, they've been able to give you about 35% three-point shooting, but they were grabbing well over 13 offensive rebounds per game in non-conference play. Here in conference play, that's down to about 9.3. Now, they still should have a very sizable advantage on the glass, as this is a Kansas State team that has been allowing a lot of second and third chances in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound for opponents. 322nd in all of college basketball. And the one thing that Baylor has been able to do a really good job of is being able to reel in those second chances there. 17th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, with Cameron Carr driving things. 19 points, 5 boards, shoots 40% from 3. Tonde Yusufu, not a great outside shooter, but 18.5 points, 5.5 boards. Dan Skillings is able to throw in there about 6.5 rebounds per game, but you have a team with absolutely no depth whatsoever. It's a Baylor team that in a pressure spot, they shoot 73% of the free throw line. That's country average, and Baylor has been giving up quite a bit from the outside. Right now, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 34% from three-point range, outside the top 150 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. For Baylor, they're about 211th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Kansas State, they've been more around 225th, but I do think that this interim coaching regime and everything that has happened with Kansas State has these guys a little bit more fired up. I do anticipate them playing a little bit more of a slow and more controlled style of basketball now that Jerome Tang is out. So I set a line of 3. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Kansas State, sort of banking on a lot of guys rising up after the coach got dismissed, and I'm in on the under. So willing to take the points with Kansas State, and 161.5 or higher in on the under, made that total 161. 645, 646. You've got Iowa playing us to Nebraska. And Nebraska does find themselves as a very slim underdog here of 1 to 1.5 points. 137.5 to 139.5 is the total. This opened up at a 137.5. Now we're seeing it tick upward, but like the under even more. Semi-total 135.5. Not going to get a ton of possessions in this game. Iowa, a super slow and controlled team. Out of 365 Division I teams, they are 362nd in terms of total possessions per game. Nebraska is 239th, but I do think that Iowa gets the job done here. I set my line at 2.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number, mainly because this is a Nebraska team that they live and die with their three-point shots. They're a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three-point range, and they pretty much just, for lack of a better term, dare you to shoot from three-point range. In terms of opponents' field goal attempts that come from three-point range, they force you to take 50.6% of your shots from three-point range. That's the 5th highest mark in all of college basketball, and this is an Iowa team that is very capable of being able to knock down their shots with Bennett Sturts being able to give this team well over 18 points per contest. He's like the lone guy on the roster. It gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, but doles out 5 assists per game as well. It's an Iowa team that's done a great job on the turnover battle as well. Top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and for Iowa, they shoot as a whole 36.8% from three-point range. That is a top 40 mark in all of college basketball, even though the main attraction is Sturts. You've been able to get a lot recently out of Tavon Banks. He's up to 11 points per game, and he's shooting 46% from three-point range. You've even got like a guy like a Tate Sage who's been able to shoot 40% from 3, 6 points per contest. Alvaro Falgarius, 8 points, 4 boards at 6'9". He's been able to shoot about 36% from the outside, and for Iowa, really good in terms of taking care of the ball as well. Top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, even though you've got a pair of slow teams, both of these teams have been incredibly efficient on the offensive side of things as well. Nebraska is currently 55th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you just splice it out for road/neutral court games, they are 10th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got an Iowa group that is 18th in the country in terms of points per possession, but this Iowa defense is much better when they're at home rather than away from home. Overall for the season with Iowa, they're checking in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, more in that neighborhood, about 51st in the country, but they do give up 12.1 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home. And Nebraska, to their credit, 13th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And you've got the former Hawkeye who's been leading the way in Price Sanford. He's up to 17.5 points, shooting 40% from 3-point. Marcus Lawrence shoots 39% from 3-point. It's an Iowa team that is going to have a little bit of a tough time on the inside. They've been outside the top 25 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And even though Nebraska loves to take their 3-point shots, when they do pound it inside, they've been a top 30 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. But here's what I think keeps you under. You just are not going to get a lot of second and third chances on the glass in this game, as for Iowa, even though they don't grab a lot of second and third chances for themselves, they're pretty good in terms of not allowing them. And Nebraska, 287th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Iowa's more around about 172nd. And if this does come down to late fouls, Nebraska, they shoot 76% at the free throw line. It's an Iowa team more around about 76.4%. So made Iowa the 2.5 point favorite. I think that they get the job done at home. I'm going to be one to lay the number, and like the under, semi-total 135.5, 647, 648. LSU is on the road against Texas, and Texas, they are back to being a favorite here of 10 to 11 points on this game, 151 to 152, and I said Texas as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to take the points. It's a Texas defense that just has been two-stepping their way to being not very good. Right now, they are, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 165th in the country, albeit they are giving up 18.9 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. And LSU, 194th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. LSU has not even been a great 3-point shooting percentage team this season, but they have been a top 45 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, albeit when D-Don Thomas is out of the fold, that really takes a nosedive. But for LSU, they only shoot about 32.1% from 3-point. It's a Texas team that has not necessarily been the world's greatest 3-point shooting team themselves. Right now for Texas, they shoot from 3-point range about 34.2%, and that goes down to 32.2% at home. They've been relying upon the just versatility of Mateus Valkaitis along with Dalen Swain. Swain comes over from Xavier with his coach in Sean Miller, 17.5 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 33% from 3, and Valkaitis, 15.5 points, 7 boards. Texas has been a pretty solid team in terms of not allowing second and third chances, top 100 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage, and they're doing a nice job on the inside. Top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're top 30 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. And then for LSU, you've been able to have a lot of production on Markel Sutton. He's supplying 8 boards, 13.5 points per game. D-Don Thomas, again, dealing with a lot of injuries. I would anticipate him being out once again. We haven't seen him here in the month of February. But that said, in the interim, you've got Max McKinnon with his versatility, 14 points, 2.5 assists. He shoots 39% per 3, 92% at the free throw line. It's an LSU team that still remains in the top 100 with regards to a few turnovers on a per possession basis, and even with having D-Don Thomas out, this has been a team that's still been pretty solid overall. Now the offense has taken a little bit of a nosedive. They have scored 71 points or fewer in each of their previous 3 games and 4 of their last 5, but I do think that they're going to be able to do just enough to remain lively in this one, especially with Texas being like today's call on defense. LSU is as well, and you've got a pair of teams that are relatively mid-tempo. Texas 184th in terms of total possessions per game, LSU 180th, so made a total of 156.5, like the over, and I'm in on the points with LSU, made them an 8.5 point dog, 649, 650 on the card. Air Force is on the road against New Mexico. New Mexico is a 27.5 to a 28.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 147.5, and I took the points with Air Force. I set them as a 26.5 point underdog, and good grief. May the good Lord have a little bit of mercy on me for this one, because this team is terrible. They are a bottom 25 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're a bottom 30 team with regards to rebound percentage. I just think that pride is going to take over. They have their coach in Joe Scott currently on indefinite suspension due to everything that happened there. They're a part of a military institute, so you have to think that they're going to have a little bit of pride here. You got Lucas Hobble and Cam Sanders, who are both giving between 11.5 to 12 points per game. Between the two of them, they shoot about 34.5% per 3 and 78% at the free throw line. Sanders about 3.5 assists per game, though. Air Force, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball, and New Mexico is a top 45 team in terms of generating turnovers, so that's a little bit rough. But with this Air Force team, they're slowing games down. They're outside the top 320 in terms of total possessions per game away from home. And New Mexico, they're not really knocking your socks off on the glass. 144th with regards to rebound percentage. They're outside the top 110 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Jake Hall's been solid, 15.5 points. He is able to shoot about 44% from 3. Dayton Albury shoots 37.5% from three, along with Araya Tente. Both of these guys give you 11 points per game, so they've been able to do a nice job on that front. And New Mexico is by far the better team. I'm not going to try to sell you anything like that, but I do think that Air Force is going to be able to give you a little bit of an okay effort with this New Mexico team. They're good, but they're not necessarily great on the offensive side of things. They don't give themselves second chances, and I do think that in this spot, that is just enough for them to be able to hold in this game, even though I don't think that it's going to be a comfortable cover for Air Force. I set my line at 26.5, so here at 27.5, I'm taking the points with what has been a really, really stinky Air Force team, and I'm going to be in on the under. I set my total at a 144.5, 651, 652. Nevada is going to be on the road against San Jose State. Old San Jose State is a home underdog of 10.5 to 11 points, 141.5 to 142 is the total, and I did make a total of a 144. I like the over. Now, it's going to be a low-tempo game. San Jose State, 328th in terms of total possessions per game. Nevada, a little bit faster, but still just 289th. But you go back to the last time that these two teams played a few weeks ago, Nevada just absolutely blowtorched San Jose State. That was 87 to 54. I think that you get a similar game. San Jose State was dealing with a few injuries, and now they've got a few of those guys back, as they're not going to be having their main rebounder, Yafam Mundi, back anytime soon. 12.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. But Kobe Garland, he was dealing with injury at the time. He's been able to give you 18.5 points to 39% from three-point. You've had a few injuries as well. That Adrian Myers, about 8 points. He shoots about 35% from three, and I do think that that keeps them lively. Now, both of these teams are rough with their interior offense. Both of these teams are actually outside the top 310 with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, but the difference is this is a Nevada team that just goes into flamethrower mode from three-point. Overall, they shoot 38% from three-point. That goes up to 39.1% in games played away from home. That's a top 25 mark in the country, and for Nevada, they've also done a really good job in terms of maximizing possessions by not turning the ball over. They are 20th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and that's one of the few things that San Jose State has been relatively okay with. And for the San Jose State team, they've been better with their perimeter defense rather than their interior defense, but they're still about 286th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Nevada, they do allow teams to shoot 37.2% from three-point away from home, and they've been dealing with the injury to Joel Armatrain down low all season long, but they have by far the best rebounder in this game, Elijah Price, 13 points, 9 rebounds per game. Corey Camper, well, he's been camping out for shooting 44% from three, 17.5 points per game out of him. Von Weems has been able to shoot about 43% from three-point range as well. And for the Nevada group, they've been a pretty solid team in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. They've been a pretty pedestrian team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but in terms of not allowing second and third chances, this Nevada team right now checks in about 90th in all of college basketball. In San Jose State, they're just getting blowtorched down low. 350th. They are allowing at home teams to grab 36.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and I think that that's going to be just enough for you to get over. So, set my line at 12, willing to lay with Nevada, and made a total of a 154, so also in on that over. 653, 654. Grand Canyon's on the road against San Diego State, and old San Diego State is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. 137.5 to 138.5 is the total, and made a total of a 138. Personally, between a 137.5 to a 138.5, I'd rather have the 138.5 to the under rather than the over, because even though San Diego State, if you look at the overall season numbers, are 89th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, bit of a warped stat. They play the double overtime game against Troy. They play the triple overtime game against Boise State. So if you look at regulation and regulation only, a little bit of a up-tempo team, probably like 120th, 130th in terms of total possessions per game, but not quite that fast. And San Diego State does a great job in terms of not allowing a lot of clean possessions in their game with the way that they've been able to generate turnovers this year. San Diego State back in the top 35 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they generate a turnover at home on 22.5% of opponents' possessions. Overall, they're 10th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and this Grand Canyon team has been able to travel really well with their defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis overall this season, Grand Canyon is 35th in the country, but if you look at specifically games played away from home, that does ascend into the top 30, and Grand Canyon is shooting less than 26% from three-point range away from home as well. So they have been one of the worst outside shooting teams away from home in the country, but do have Jaden Henley, who's supplying 17 points per game. He's been able to supply about 5.5 rebounds, a steal and a half per game as well. And Grand Canyon, not quite the same team as San Diego State in terms of generating turnovers, but top 130 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They've been a top 55 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and for Grand Canyon, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of getting to the free throw line. They shoot 75.5% when they get to the free throw line. You've got Nanu Wusu Nane giving you great versatility as well, 9.5 points, 8.5 boards, steal and a half per contest. And then on the flip side for San Diego State, this has been one of the better three-point shooting teams in the country, as right now you've got Reese Waters and BJ Davis as your top two scorers combined for 23.5 points per game, and Davis shoots 38% from three-point range. Magoon Wyeth continues to shoot 63% from three-point range, 9.5 points per game. He just returned in the team's last game against Nevada at 13 points in 14 minutes, so looks like he's all good to go for the stretch run, and then you've been able to get some good production down low out of someone like a Farrell Compton, who's been able to give you about 8.5 points per game. You've been having Miles Bird come up with about 10 points per contest as well, so a lot of mixing and shaking. San Diego State, they're another team that shoots about 75% at the free throw line, but I do think that Grand Canyon is going to be able to do a nice job against a San Diego State team that has been a top 75 team with their three-point shooting percentage, as they do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc as well in games played away from home. Teams are only shooting about 31.5% from three-point range. That's a top 55 mark in the country, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a slow and controlled game with Grand Canyon being able to take hold on defense. In the end, I did set my line at 8. Between a 7.5 to an 8.5, would rather take the points with Grand Canyon and trust in that defense, so I'm in on the under and 8.5 plus here with Grand Canyon. 655, 656. Minnesota is going to be on the road against Oregon. The state with the small strengths in the union. Minnesota is a 3.5 to a 4.5 point underdog. 134.5 to 135.5 is the total, and for Oregon, could only set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to take the points. Now, the good news for Oregon is getting back Nick Biddle, that it's going to help them out, and you got a Minnesota team that has very demonstrative home and road splits on defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home, Minnesota right around about 31st to 32nd in the country. When they are away from home, that goes to 342nd, and Oregon is not a great defense themselves, 183rd in the country in terms of their points scored on a per possession basis, 261st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but getting back Nate Biddle I think is big because he's a 7-footer that has been able to shoot it relatively well from three. He's shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's been giving this team about 6.5 to 7 rebounds per game, leads the team in that aspect, 17 points per game, and you still have TK Simpkins and Kawam Evans, who've been combining for about 25.5 points per game. Jack Shell said, I don't know if he's going to return all season long, but that's it for Simpkins. Shoots about 37.5% from three-point range, and the main forte for this Oregon offense when Biddle was out there on the floor was being able to grab second and third chances. In terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, Oregon is still about 58th in the country, even with the time that Biddle missed, and Minnesota just doesn't do a lot of that. 258th in the country in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but it's still an Oregon team that's really sloppy with regards to the turnover battle. They're outside the top 230 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. On defense, they're outside the top 260 in terms of generating turnovers, and Minnesota's about 100th in terms of taking care of the ball. They don't really put you under duress, but they've been a top 75 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Kate Tyson is like the lone out of their top 4 scorers that shoots about 32.5% from 3, but 19.5 points, 39% three-point shooter, 5.5 rebounds per game. Jalen Crocker Johnson, 13.5 points, 7 boards. He's been rock solid. Isaac Kusama has been able to give you 4 assists per game, and Langston Reynolds, about 4.5 assists per game. I think that that's enough for Minnesota to remain lively. Have to take note that they're shooting just 69% of the free throw line. If you want to take the money line, that keeps me off of that a little bit. And again, Minnesota just not the same defensive team away from home, but I do think that even though both of these teams are relatively slow, especially Minnesota, they're about 345th in terms of total possessions per game, that for lack of a better term, the lack of defensive efficiency gets you over. So set my line at 2.5. I'm only take 3+ here with Minnesota, and I'm in on the over. Last game on the normal Las Vegas betting more before we get the extra game, 657, 658. Texas Tech is going to be on the road against Arizona State. Arizona State is an 8.5 to an 8.0 underdog. 154 to 153.5 is the total. Made Texas Tech the 9-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Texas Tech, it just really is feeling like they're starting to be able to get it going once again on defense. It's a Texas Tech team that has been good with regards to perimeter defense. 48th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percent. Despite the fact that JT Toppin gives you 21 plus points, 9.5 to 10 rebounds per game, it has been a team that's left something to be desired on the interior, and still overall for the season, Texas Tech is just 98th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But all of a sudden, Graham McCaslin and that style, it just feels like it's really starting to take hold once again. This is a unit that has now given up fewer than 70 points in each out of their last 3 games, and if you want to go a little bit further, in all but 2 out of their last 11 games, they've given up 74 points or fewer. And you have Christian Anderson, who's been giving you about 19 points per game. He shoots 43.5% from 3. Donovan Atwell is shooting 44.5% from the outside, 12.5 points per game. It's a Texas Tech team that is actually country average with their 2-point shooting percentage, but they've been a top 15 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and this is an Arizona State team that they pride themselves on generating turnovers. They've been a top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They are not holding up their end of the bargain on defense, currently 237th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, because they're getting just dump trucked down the glass. You got Mo Odom, who's a really nice guard, 17.6 assists. He shoots 38% from 3-point range, and then you've been able to have Masamba Diop be able to give you 14 points, 6 boards, and 2 blocks per contest down low. But the only other guy on the roster that gives you over 3.7 rebounds per game, Santiago Triot, 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And inexplicably, this is an Arizona State team that has been much better with their outside shooting when they have been away from home rather than at home. For Arizona State right now, overall for the season, they're shooting in that neighborhood about 34% from three. That's country average, but 30.1% at home, 37.7% away from home. And Arizona State, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, right now they are 148th in the country, but they average 4 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. Away from home, they're actually a top 35 offense in the country. At home, they're well tied the top 225, so a very interesting dynamic here. I did set a total of a 155.5, 153.5, 154. I think that this could be just close enough for late game felling, and Texas Tech has been really efficient on offense, and Arizona State is going to be looking to push a little bit more tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They're 66, so in on the over at a 154.5 or less, and with Texas Tech, we'll lay up to 8.5 with them. And now we hit our lone extra game.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-551, 306-552. Gardner-Webb is on the road against Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern, 16.5 to 17.5 point favorites, 159.5. It's a total. Semi-line 23. I'm going to be willing to lay with Charleston Southern. I wish I could put it any other way, but this Gardner-Webb team is just awful in every aspect. They're outside the top 360 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, points allowed on a per possession basis, and in terms of rebound percentage. Like, they are quite literally doing nothing well whatsoever, and Charleston Southern actually a really good interior defense. They're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, they don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. They're a bottom 20 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they themselves turn the ball over 14 times per game, but Gardner-Webb is well outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers on defense, and Alan Sumler, Bryson Blaine, they've been able to combine for about 35.7 points per game. Sumler shoots 40% from three-point. Just a Charleston Southern team that has been at home shooting about 37.8% from three-point. That's a top 85 mark in the country. They, with regards to their interior offense as well, are a top 125 team with that regard as well. Top 30 team in terms of shot blocks as well. You've got Reese Jones, who's been able to give you 2 blocks per game, and the reason why I'm in on the under, even though Charleston Southern is playing at warp speed, top 20 team, as a matter of fact, top 15 team in terms of total possessions per game, Gardner-Webb just doesn't have a lot of scoring right now. You've got Jacob Hogreth, who gives you 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Spence Sims, 10 points per game, and they actually combine to shoot over 45% from three-pointers. But team as a whole shoots 31.5% from the outside. Charleston Southern has been pretty good with regards to our perimeter defense. I do think that for this Gardner-Webb team, pride is going to take over. They're not going to want to give up 100 points like they did the last time around. Not even kidding. They lost a high point, 112 to 87. And the loss is a rebound battle, 44 to 15. Like, they were one rebound away from getting tripled up on the glass. Like, that's how bad this team is right now. They're just literally doing nothing right. I wish I could put it any other way, but Charleston Southern, I feel like, has a massive advantage here at pretty much all facets of basketball. Set my line at 23. I'm going to be well away with Charleston Southern, and in on the under, set my total 155, and that wraps things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Super Sound, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like sharing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at G_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. And if you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.